The first thing you need to understand is that I wasn't some hero out there on the road. I was a long-haul trucker running a load of frozen chicken from Amarillo to Memphis. 3 days behind schedule because my reefer unit had blown a compressor outside Childress. My name is Dale Brecker. 47 years old, divorced twice. One daughter in Knoxville who stopped returning my calls around Christmas. I'm telling you this because when the world fell apart, I wasn't prepared. I wasn't armed to the teeth or stocked with survival gear. I had a cab over Kenworth, half a tank of diesel, a thermos of cold coffee, and a CB radio that mostly picked up static. It was November 14th, somewhere around 2 in the morning, when I pulled into the Lone Star rest stop, just east of the Oklahoma border. I remember the date because I'd been listening to AM radio all night, catching fragments of news reports that didn't make sense. Something about quarantine zones in Atlanta. Something about National Guard deployments in Nashville. The DJ kept cutting in and out, and I figured it was just the usual late-night conspiracy garbage that bleeds through the airwaves after midnight. The rest stop was empty. Not quiet. Empty. The fluorescent lights buzzed over the parking lot, illuminating exactly 0 vehicles. No other trucks, no passenger cars, no overnight RVs from retirees heading south for winter. The bathrooms were unlocked. The vending machines still hummed. But there wasn't a single person anywhere. I stood in that parking lot with my boots on cold asphalt and felt something I couldn't name. Not fear yet. More like the disorientation you feel when you walk into a room and forget why you entered. I used the restroom, washed my hands, noticed the paper towel dispenser had been ripped partially off the wall, hanging by one bolt. There was something dark smeared along the tile near the far stall. Could have been mud. Could have been something else. I didn't investigate. You don't investigate things at 2 in the morning in empty rest stops. You get back in your truck and drive. But I didn't drive. I sat in my cab and tried the CB. Channel 19 was dead. Channel 9, the emergency channel, was dead. I cycled through every frequency I knew, and on Channel 14, I caught a voice. Male, frantic, breathing hard. If anyone's listening, do not stop between mile marker 212 and 240. Do not stop. They're in the median. They come out of the tree line. Do not. The transmission cut with a sound like someone dropping the handset. I was sitting at mile marker 226. My hands found the ignition before my brain finished processing. The Kenworth rumbled to life, and I pulled out of that rest stop without checking my mirrors, without releasing my trailer brakes properly. I heard them grind and didn't care. The road ahead was black and straight and impossibly empty. No headlights coming, no taillights going. Just me and 40 tons of frozen poultry barreling east at 70 miles per hour. That's when I saw the first one. It was standing in the breakdown lane, just beyond the reach of my headlights at first, a shape that resolved into a person as I closed the distance. A woman in a hospital gown, barefoot, standing perfectly still with her arms at her sides. Her head was tilted at an angle that no conscious person would hold. As my headlights swept across her, she turned, not her body, just her head, tracking my truck with a movement that was too smooth, too mechanical. Her mouth was open. Her eyes caught the light and reflected it back like an animal's. I passed her at speed. In my side mirror, I watched her step into the lane where I'd been. Then she started running. Not toward me. She couldn't catch a truck at 70. But running in the direction I was heading, as if she knew where the road went. I drove faster. The coffee in my thermos was ice cold, but I drank it anyway because my hands needed something to do. 40 minutes later, I reached the next rest area. Pushmataha Service Plaza, just inside Oklahoma. I didn't want to stop, but my fuel gauge was dropping, and there was a diesel island at this one. I'd fueled here dozens of times over 15 years of running this corridor. Knew the woman who worked the overnight counter. Marlene, 60s, gray braid, always had butterscotch candies in a dish next to the register. The plaza lights were on. 3 vehicles sat in the parking area. A minivan with its rear hatch open, a sedan with both front doors ajar, and an 18-wheeler, a Freightliner with Missouri plates, parked at the diesel island with the pump still inserted in the tank. The fuel had overflowed at some point. I could smell it before I even opened my door. A river of diesel had pooled beneath the truck and run in a dark tributary toward the grass median. I killed my engine and listened. Wind. The fluorescent buzz. A faint, rhythmic thumping from inside the service building. Mechanical, like a door swinging against its frame in a draft. Nothing else. I needed fuel. That was the calculation. Whatever was happening, whatever that woman on the highway had been, I couldn't outrun it on fumes. So I climbed down, crossed to the Freightliner's pump, and removed the nozzle from its tank. My hands were shaking. I slid my fuel card into the reader and waited for the authorization beep. It came. The pump engaged. Diesel began flowing into my saddle tanks with that low, gurgling sound I'd heard 10,000 times before, except now it sounded obscenely loud. While the pump ran, I looked at the Freightliner's cab. The driver's door was open. The dome light was dead, either switched off or the battery had drained. On the step rail, I could see a boot. Just one boot, lying on its side as if someone had kicked it off. The CB inside was keyed open. I could see the handset dangling by its cord, swinging slightly. The thumping from the building stopped. I turned toward the service plaza. Through the glass doors, I could see the interior, the snack racks, the coffee station, the counter where Marlene would have been sitting. The lights inside flickered once, then held steady. And there was Marlene. She was behind the counter, exactly where she always was, sitting on her stool, facing forward, not moving. For 10 seconds, I convinced myself she was fine, sleeping, waiting for a customer. Then my eyes adjusted to the distance, and I saw that her butterscotch dish was shattered on the floor, that her gray braid was undone, hair hanging loose and dark with something wet, that her hands were on the counter, palms up, fingers curled inward like dead spiders. She wasn't sleeping. The pump clicked off, tank full. I replaced the nozzle with the kind of controlled urgency that precedes outright panic. As I turned back toward my truck, movement caught my peripheral vision. From behind the minivan, a figure rose from a crouch. Male, heavyset, wearing a trucker's vest with reflective stripes. His face was wrong, jaw hanging open too wide, skin mottled gray and purple like a bruise that covered everything. He saw me, and his body oriented toward me like a compass needle finding north. I ran. Not gracefully. I scrambled up my cab steps and slammed the door and hit the locks and the engine and the air brakes, all in a sequence that felt like one continuous motion. The man in the vest was crossing the fuel island now, not running, but walking with a terrible purpose. His gait uneven, one leg dragging slightly. Behind him, from the service building, I saw the glass door swing open. Marlene had stood up. I released the brakes and pulled forward with the diesel pump hose still connected. It snapped free of the dispenser with a crack and whipped across my fuel tank before falling away. I didn't care. I was on the road in 12 seconds flat, merging onto the empty interstate with my heart trying to exit through my throat. My CB crackled. Channel 14 again. A different voice this time. Female, calm, measured. Any drivers eastbound on I-40? This is Linda Vasquez, Unit 7744. I'm at mile marker 289. I can see you. Flash your lights if you're alive. I flashed my lights. 3 quick bursts, then held them on high beam. Ahead in the darkness, maybe half a mile up, I saw answering flashes from another rig. A big Peterbilt with a flatbed trailer pulled onto the shoulder with its hazards blinking. As I approached, I could make out the driver standing beside her cab, waving me down with a road flare that painted everything in hellish red. I pulled behind her and set my brakes. She walked back to meet me. Linda Vasquez, 5'0", mid-30s, dark hair pulled back tight, wearing a flannel shirt over a tank top and jeans tucked into work boots. She had a tire iron in her free hand, held casually but ready. "You see the ones at the plaza?" she asked before I'd even fully descended from my cab. 2 of them. One was the overnight clerk. "I saw 5 when I passed through 20 minutes ago. They're multiplying, or more are coming out of the woods." She killed the flare by pressing it against the asphalt. "You got fuel?" "Full tanks, just filled up." "Good. I'm at 3/4. We need to keep moving east, but I need to tell you what I know first." She climbed up onto my passenger step and leaned into the cab, glancing at my CB. "You been monitoring the radio?" "Caught a warning on 14. And then you." Linda pulled herself into my passenger seat without asking permission. In any other circumstance, I'd have protested. But the rules of normal interaction had evaporated somewhere between that hospital gown woman and Marlene's dead spider hands. She keyed my CB to channel 4 and adjusted the squelch. "Listen," she said. For 30 seconds, nothing. Then a recorded message began playing. Automated, government-issued, the kind of flat synthetic voice they use for emergency broadcasts. "Attention all travelers. Interstate corridors I-40, I-44, and I-35 are under emergency traffic management. All civilian vehicles are directed to proceed to designated safe zones. Nearest safe zone to your east, Fort Smith, Arkansas. Do not exit the interstate. Do not stop at unmarked facilities. If you encounter individuals displaying erratic behavior, do not engage. Maintain speed. Proceed to Fort Smith." The message looped. Linda switched it off. "Fort Smith is still 90 miles east," I said. "I know, but here's what they're not saying." Linda leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "I came from Albuquerque 2 days ago. Albuquerque is gone, Dale. Not under quarantine, gone. I watched the infection move through a truck stop outside Tucumcari in real time. 30 people in the building. Took maybe 40 minutes for all of them to turn. It spreads through bites, but also through something else. Something in the air when they're clustered together. I don't know the science. I just know that anyone who stayed in enclosed spaces with them didn't stay human for long." I stared at her. "How do you know my name?" She pointed at my door. "It's on your truck, genius. Brecker Transport, LLC." Despite everything, I almost laughed. Almost. "So, what's the play?" I asked. "We drive together. Convoy. Watch each other's backs on the CB. Don't stop unless we absolutely have to. And if we stop, one of us stays in the cab with the engine running." She looked at me directly, and her eyes were steady. No panic in them, just calculation. "I've been driving trucks for 11 years. I know this road. I know every fuel point, every way station, every alternate route between here and Memphis. Whatever this is, it's moving faster than the government response. But we've got 2 rigs, full fuel, and 2,000 feet of road visibility. That's better odds than anyone on foot." I nodded. It was the most rational thing anyone had said to me in hours. Linda climbed down and jogged back to her Peterbilt. I watched her pull herself up into the cab with practiced ease, and 30 seconds later, her voice crackled over Channel 14. "Brecker, let's roll. I'll take point. Keep 500 feet between us. If I brake hard, you brake hard. If I go dark on the radio, you don't follow. You turn around." "Copy," I said, and released my brakes. We made 20 miles in good time, running dark except for our low beams, maintaining the gap Linda had specified. The interstate was a void. No traffic in either direction, no lights from the towns that should have been visible off the exits. Every overpass we passed under was empty. Every road sign reflected our headlights back at us with indifferent precision. Mile markers ticked by like a countdown to something I couldn't name. Linda's voice came through the CB at regular intervals, short, professional. "Clear ahead. Overpass clean. Exit 198, no movement." She was scanning constantly, and her reports gave our transit a rhythm that kept my mind from spiraling. Between her updates, I watched my mirrors. Nothing followed us. The road behind was as empty as the road ahead. At mile marker 251, Linda broke pattern. "Brecker, vehicle ahead, left lane, stationary." I saw it a moment later. A school bus, bright yellow even in the darkness, parked diagonally across the left lane with its stop sign arm extended. Its emergency lights were not flashing. Its door was open. "Going right," Linda said, and her Peterbilt eased into the right lane, giving the bus wide clearance. I followed. As I passed, my headlights illuminated the interior through the windows. Empty seats, backpacks scattered on the floor, a jacket draped over one seat back. No children, no driver, no blood. That was somehow worse. Blood would have been evidence of something. Violence, struggle, humanity fighting back. The absence of it suggested something quieter, something that made people simply leave. "Bus is clear," I reported. "Saw it. Keep moving." 3 miles later, we encountered the first real obstacle. A jackknifed tractor trailer stretched across both lanes, its cargo, lumber, spilled across the median and into the grass. The trailer had torn free of the fifth wheel and lay on its side like a gutted animal. There was no way around it on the road itself. "Shoulder?" Linda asked. I looked at the right shoulder, narrow, dropping off into a drainage ditch. Too tight for a rig. The left shoulder merged into the median, which was flat grass for about 30 feet before rising into the opposite lanes. "Median crossing," I said. "It's flat enough." "Going for it." Linda's Peterbilt left the road surface and dropped onto the grass median with a lurch. Her trailer swayed, flatbed, lighter than my reefer. And she powered through, tires chewing mud, engine roaring in low gear. She crossed the median, rode the opposite lanes for 200 yards, then cut back across to our side beyond the wreck. "Clean," my turn. The Kenworth was heavier, my reefer trailer adding weight that pressed the tires deeper into the soft earth. I felt the rear axle slip, caught traction, slipped again. For 5 seconds, I was stuck. Wheels spinning, mud spraying. And in those 5 seconds, something moved in the wreckage of the lumber truck. A figure emerged from beneath the spilled planks, pushing them aside with an arm that bent at an angle arms shouldn't bend. It was a man, the driver maybe, wearing a flannel shirt torn open, his chest visible and marked with something dark. He stood, unsteady, and his head swept left and right, with that same mechanical tracking motion I'd seen in the hospital gown woman. He found my truck. My wheels caught. The Kenworth surged forward, clawing out of the mud and back onto asphalt with a jolt that rattled my teeth. In my mirror, the figure from the wreckage stood in the median, watching me go. Then it began walking, not toward me, but toward the road, following the direction I was heading, just like the first one had. "You clear?" Linda's voice. "Clear. There was one in the wreckage." "I know. I saw it in my mirror when you got stuck." "Dale, they're all heading east. You notice that? Every single one we've seen. They're all facing east or moving east." I hadn't noticed, but she was right. "What's east?" I asked. "Memphis, Nashville, Atlanta." A pause. "People." The weight of Linda's observation settled over us like a tarp pulled tight. The infected weren't wandering aimlessly. They were migrating, as drawn by something, maybe population density, maybe sound, maybe some signal beyond our comprehension. And we were driving into the same current, heading toward the same coast they were shambling toward. "Should we turn around?" I asked. The question felt enormous coming out of my mouth. Turning around meant Albuquerque, meant the emptied places Linda had already fled from. But ahead meant convergence, meeting whatever was pulling them east. "No." Linda's response was immediate. "What's behind us has already fallen. Fort Smith might still be holding. The broadcast said it's a safe zone. If the military is anywhere, they're east, between the infected and the population centers they're trying to protect." It was logical. I didn't argue. At mile marker 267, the road curved south, and for the first time, we could see lights ahead. Not headlights, but stationary lights. A cluster of them, off the highway to the right. A town, or what was left of one. "That's Poteau," Linda said. "Small town, maybe 3,000 people. The exit's in 2 miles. Are we stopping?" "No. But I want you to look at something when we pass the overpass." The overpass appeared ahead. State Route 271 crossing above I-40. As we approached, I could see what Linda meant. People were on the overpass, not infected. People. 3 of them, waving flashlights down at us, jumping, shouting things I couldn't hear over my engine. One of them had a sign, a bedsheet held up with something written on it. I caught fragments as I passed beneath. "Help" and "please" and "children." My foot touched the brake instinctively. Linda's voice cut in like a blade. "Don't stop. There are kids up there, Linda. I know. But we cannot help them from down here. And if we take the exit, we're going into a town we don't know the status of. In the dark, with no weapons, and no way to get people into our cabs without exposing ourselves." She was right. I knew she was right. And I hated her for it, with a flash of rage that surprised me. Because it was really rage at myself. At the mathematics of survival that had replaced every moral instinct I'd ever relied on. I drove under the overpass without stopping. In my mirror, the flashlights kept waving, growing smaller. And then the curve of the road took them from my sight entirely. "I'm not okay with that," I said into the CB. "Neither am I," Linda replied. "But I'll be less okay with dying in a town we can't navigate in the dark, with those things migrating through it. We reach Fort Smith. We tell them about Poteau. That's how we help." I didn't respond. The silence between us stretched for miles, actual miles, marked by green signs and reflectors, while my mind replayed those flashlight beams and the word "children" on a bedsheet. This was the first fracture. Not in the world. The world had already fractured. This was the first fracture in me. The place where who I was before met who I was becoming. And the two couldn't coexist. At mile marker 280, something changed on the road ahead. Linda's brake lights flared red. Brecker, stop, full stop. I braked hard, the reefer trailer pushing against the cab as air brakes hissed and locked. We came to rest with half a mile between us and whatever Linda had seen. What is it? Roadblock. Military vehicles. 2 Humvees across both lanes. And she paused. I don't see any soldiers. Abandoned? Maybe, or maybe they're inside. I'm going to flash my lights and wait. She hit her high beams. 3 flashes. Same signals she'd used to find me. The roadblock didn't respond. The Humvees sat dark and silent, forming a V-shape across the highway. Behind them, I could see the silhouette of a larger vehicle, maybe a troop transport. No movement. I'm going to get closer on foot, Linda said. Keep your engine running. Linda, engine running, Dale. If I'm not back in 3 minutes, you drive through. I watched her climb down from the Peterbilt, tire iron in hand, and walk toward the roadblock with a stride that was neither hurried nor hesitant. She moved like someone who had already accepted that every step might be her last and had made peace with the geometry of it. Her flashlight beam swept the Humvees, one then the other, and she circled wide, approaching from the shoulder rather than straight down the lane. 2 minutes passed. I counted them by the clock on my dashboard, each second drawn out like wire through a die. My hands gripped the steering wheel with enough force to ache. Linda's voice returned, but quieter now. She was speaking close to her portable radio, keeping volume low. Roadblock's empty. Both Humvees are operational. Keys in ignition. Weapons gone. No bodies. But Dale, there's a lot of spent brass on the ground. Someone fired hundreds of rounds here. And the transport truck behind, it's full of supplies. MREs, water, medical kits, all still loaded. What happened to the soldiers? I don't know. But whatever they were shooting at, they either ran from it or it took them. Either way, they left in a hurry. A pause. I'm going to move one of the Humvees. There's enough gap on the right shoulder if I angle it. Give me 60 seconds. I heard the distant cough of a Humvee engine starting. Headlights flared ahead as Linda maneuvered the vehicle off the road, scraping it along the guardrail to create a gap wide enough for our trailers. She was efficient. The whole operation took 40 seconds. You're clear. Come through slow. And Dale, grab some of those supplies if you can. Pull alongside the transport. I eased forward, threading my rig through the gap with inches to spare on either side. As I passed the second Humvee, my headlights caught something on the ground I wish they hadn't. A helmet, cracked down the middle, with hair still attached to something inside it. I didn't look longer than I had to. The transport truck was an M939, 5-ton military cargo vehicle with a canvas-covered bed. I pulled alongside and climbed down, leaving my engine running as instructed. The canvas flap was untied, and inside, the cargo was exactly as Linda described. Cases of MREs stacked 6 high, pallets of bottled water, a green medical kit the size of a suitcase. I grabbed what I could carry, 2 cases of MREs, a flat of water, the medical kit, and hauled them into my cab in 3 trips. My arms burned, but the weight of supplies felt like armor. Linda was back in her Peterbilt by the time I finished. Ready? Ready? We rolled forward together, leaving the abandoned roadblock behind. But the spent brass and the cracked helmet and the missing soldiers told a story I couldn't ignore. The military had been here, had tried to hold this point, and had failed. Whatever was coming east had pushed through armed resistance. And if soldiers with automatic weapons couldn't hold a position, what chance did 2 truckers with a tire iron have? Linda, the safe zone in Fort Smith. What if it's like this? What if they've already been overrun? Then we keep driving east until we find something that's still standing. And if nothing is? Then we find an island, or a mountain, or a place with one road in and one road out, and we make our stand there. Her voice carried no drama. Just the flat pragmatism of someone running through scenarios faster than emotion could contaminate them. The highway opened ahead into a long straightaway. Somewhere out there, Fort Smith waited. Military presence or empty checkpoint, salvation or another ghost town. We'd know in 50 miles. The dashboard clock read 4:17 a.m. Dawn was still 90 minutes away, and the darkness between here and there felt like a living thing with intentions of its own. I pressed the accelerator and watched the speedometer climb. My daughter's face surfaced unbidden in my mind. Rachel, 23, last seen at a gas station in Knoxville when I'd stopped through and she'd agreed to coffee but not dinner. I wondered if she was alive. We saw Fort Smith from 10 miles out. Or rather, we saw what Fort Smith had become. The sky above the city glowed orange, not the warm amber of streetlights, but the flickering, living orange of fires burning without anyone to fight them. Columns of smoke rose in 3 distinct locations, visible even against the pre-dawn darkness. And the smell reached us before the city limits did. Chemical and acrid, like burning plastic and something underneath it that I refuse to name. "The Safe Zone broadcast is still playing," Linda said. "Channel 4, looping. But look at that sky, Dale. I see it. If Fort Smith was holding, those fires would be contained. Someone would be fighting them." She was right. We were still on I-40 approaching from the west, and the highway would take us directly through the city's southern edge. The exits ahead offered off-ramps into whatever Fort Smith had become. I watched Linda's brake lights for any sign of hesitation. There was none. She maintained speed. "We bypass?" I asked. "We have to see. The broadcast mentioned a staging area at the convention center downtown. If there are survivors, military or civilian, they'd be there. We need information, Dale. We need to know what we're driving into further east. You said we shouldn't go into towns in the dark." Dawn's in 40 minutes, and Fort Smith isn't Poteau. It's a city. If there's a military presence anywhere between here and Little Rock, it's here. I didn't argue, but my stomach clenched. The fires ahead cast moving shadows across the highway. And as we passed the first exit, Rogers Avenue, I could see down the off-ramp into a commercial district. Fast food restaurants with their signs still lit. A gas station with its canopy lights on. A Walmart parking lot with dozens of cars scattered at wrong angles, doors open, as if everyone had simultaneously decided to leave their vehicles mid-park. And between the cars, figures moved. Not many, 5, 6, scattered across the vast lot, but moving with that distinctive gait. Not walking, not running, something between purposeful and wrong. "I see them," Linda said. "South Side Walmart lot. They're not near the highway. We're fine." We passed 2 more exits, each revealing the same scene in variations. Abandoned vehicles, sporadic fires, and distant figures moving through the wreckage of ordinary life. Then Linda took the 4th exit, Convention Center Drive, and I followed her down the ramp into the city proper. The convention center was massive, a modern glass and steel structure surrounded by parking garages and hotel buildings. As we descended into the area, the scope of what had happened here became clear. Military vehicles were everywhere. Humvees, supply trucks, even an APC parked on the sidewalk. But they were arranged in a perimeter that had clearly been breached. Concrete barriers lay toppled. A chain-link fence that had been erected across the main entrance road was torn open in 3 places. The metal peeled back like something had pushed through it with incredible force. Bodies, Linda said softly. There were bodies. Military personnel in camo, lying in positions that spoke of desperate last stands. Some crouched behind barriers, some prone, some in poses that suggested they'd been running. Brass casings carpeted the ground in drifts. The smell here was unbearable. I breathed through my mouth and tasted copper. But no infected. Not one. The parking area around the convention center was empty of moving figures. Whatever had overrun this position had moved on. East, I assumed, like all the others. I'm stopping, Linda said. I need to check those military vehicles for fuel, weapons, communications equipment. Something. Linda, those bodies are dead, not turned. Dead. They won't get up. A pause. The ones who were bitten got up and left. These were killed differently. Gunshot, mostly. Friendly fire or mercy kills. Her voice was clinical. She'd already processed the horror and filed it away. I envied her that ability. She stopped her Peterbilt in the middle of the access road, and I pulled alongside. Dawn was breaking over Fort Smith, and the orange glow of fires was giving way to gray morning light that made everything worse. In daylight, the convention center perimeter told its story more clearly. The military had established a forward operating base here. I could see the remnants of a triage tent, its canvas shredded, medical supplies scattered across the ground like confetti. Generators sat silent beside portable light towers. A communications array, satellite dish mounted on a Humvee, stood intact but powered down, its cables snaking across the pavement to a command vehicle with its doors open. Linda moved through the scene with purpose, checking vehicle after vehicle. I followed at a distance, unable to match her efficiency. Everybody I passed was someone's child, someone's partner, someone's reason to come home. I counted 17 before I stopped counting. Dale, over here. Linda stood beside the command vehicle, reaching inside. She emerged with a handheld radio, military-grade, digital, larger than our CB units. She pressed the power button. Nothing. Battery's dead. But these take standard lithium packs. She moved to the next vehicle, popping open a storage compartment. Got one? She swapped batteries with practiced hands and powered the radio on. Static. She cycled through frequencies, military bands I didn't recognize, until she hit one that carried a voice. Male, authoritative, calm. All units fall back to phase line Delta. Little Rock perimeter is active. Repeat, Little Rock perimeter is active. All surviving military and civilian assets proceed to Little Rock. Fort Smith is code black. Do not attempt to reinforce Fort Smith. Proceed to Little Rock. Little Rock, Linda said, looking at me. That's 3 hours east. They're still holding. If that broadcast is current, it's live. Listen, he said surviving. Present tense. They know Fort Smith has fallen and they're redirecting assets. Little Rock is still fighting. She slid the military radio into her jacket. We drive. Wait. I pointed to a row of military supply trucks, 3 of them, lined up near the convention center loading dock. Fuel, weapons, anything we can carry. Linda nodded. We split up. She took the first 2 trucks, I took the third. Mine had been partially looted already. Empty weapon cases, scattered ammunition boxes. But in the rear, beneath a tarp, I found what I needed. A pump-action shotgun with a full magazine tube, 2 boxes of shells, and a flak jacket that was too large for me, but better than flannel, against whatever came next. I also found a hand-crank flashlight, a map case with laminated regional maps, and a sleeping bag still in its compression sack. Linda returned with similar findings. A sidearm she checked and holstered with the comfort of someone who'd held weapons before. Additional ammunition, 2 water purification tablets containers, and a pair of military-grade binoculars. "You know how to use that?" I asked, nodding at her pistol. "My father was a Marine. I was shooting before I was driving." She studied me for a moment. "You know how to use that?" indicating my shotgun. "Deer hunting with my uncle as a kid. It's been 30 years. "Then keep it for close range and don't shoot until you're sure of your target." She checked the sun's position. "We've been stopped too long. Every minute stationary is a minute those things could be converging. Let's move." We returned to our trucks, newly armed, newly supplied. But as I climbed into my cab, I noticed something I'd missed before. A notebook dropped beside the command vehicle's tire. I grabbed it. Military Field Journal, handwritten. The last entry was dated November 13th, yesterday. Perimeter compromised 0347. Infection vector confirmed airborne within 15-meter proximity to active clusters of 20+. Conventional arms effective on individuals, but rate of conversion exceeds our ability to maintain fire superiority. Requesting permission to fall back to phase line Delta. No response from command. Making independent decision to withdraw. God help anyone we leave behind. I read it twice, then put it in my jacket pocket. Airborne within 15 meters of large clusters. The woman at the rest stop, alone, hadn't been a threat beyond contact. But a group of 20 or more created an infection radius just by existing in proximity. The rules were more complicated than simple bites, and the road ahead led toward denser populations where clusters would be larger. We were 30 minutes east of Fort Smith when we found the others. Not infected, survivors. 3 vehicles pulled into a rest area that shouldn't have existed according to my memory of this stretch, but there it was. A gravel turnout with a concrete picnic shelter, and 3 cars clustered together with people standing around them. Linda slowed. "I count 7 people, 2 kids. They see us." They did. 2 of them were waving, a man and a woman, both in civilian clothes, both with the specific body language of people who had been waiting for help and couldn't believe it might have arrived. A pickup truck, an SUV, and a sedan formed their little convoy. And as we pulled our rigs to the shoulder, I could see faces in the vehicle windows. Pale, exhausted, frightened. The man who approached first was young, late 20s, tall, wearing a Razorback's hoodie and jeans. "Thank God," he said as I descended from my cab. "We've been here since last night. We didn't know which way to go." "East," Linda said, joining us. "Little Rock is still holding. Military perimeter." The woman behind him, not his partner, I realized. Different ages, different looks. Was older, maybe 50, with 2 children pressed against her legs. A boy and a girl, perhaps 8 and 10. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "I'm Marcus," the young man said. "This is Diane, and those are her grandkids, Tyler and Sophie. In the truck," he pointed to the pickup that's Ben and Carl. Brothers. They were headed to Tulsa when everything went sideways. I gave our names. Introductions felt absurd in context, like exchanging business cards in a burning building. But they served a purpose. They made us human to each other. "How far back have you come from?" Linda asked Marcus. "Alma. It's 12 miles west. We left around midnight when they started coming through the neighborhood. Just walking through like a stream of them. Not attacking houses, not breaking in. Just walking east through the streets. But anyone who went outside, anyone who got close..." He swallowed. My neighbor went out to see what was happening. 30 seconds later, He was one of them. 30 seconds? I asked. Maybe less. He convulsed, fell down, and when he got up, he wasn't my neighbor anymore. That was faster than anything we'd witnessed. The military journal had mentioned 15-meter airborne proximity, but Marcus described something that seemed like instantaneous conversion from close contact. Either the infection was evolving, or different people converted at different rates. Ben and Carl emerged from the pickup, both in their 40s, both built like manual laborers, with a shotgun of their own and a hunting rifle. They looked at our rigs with something like hope. "You got diesel?" Ben asked. "Our truck's running on fumes." "We've got fuel," I said. "And we've got information. Fort Smith is gone. Little Rock is the next military position. We need to convoy together and not stop until we get there." Linda had moved to the side and was scanning the tree line with her binoculars. She turned back to the group. "We need to move now. Standing here in the open with 9 people and multiple vehicles is exactly the kind of cluster situation we need to avoid." "Cluster situation?" Diane asked, pulling her grandchildren closer. I explained what the military journal had said. The airborne vector within proximity to groups of 20 or more. Linda amended this. "We're 9, should be fine. But if we attract infected to our position, their numbers plus ours could hit that threshold. We move in convoy. 2 trucks in front, 3 cars between them. Nobody stops unless I say stop." Marcus nodded immediately. Ben and Carl exchanged a look. Not distrust, exactly, but the calculation of men used to making their own decisions. Ben spoke first. "We'll follow. But if things go south, we're breaking formation and doing what we need to do." "Fair enough," Linda said. "Let's fuel your truck from Dale's saddle tank and move out in 5 minutes." I grabbed my pump hose and got to work. The morning sun was fully up now, warming the asphalt. And somewhere behind us, the smoke from Fort Smith was still rising. Our convoy reformed and moved east. Linda's Peterbilt led, followed by Marcus's sedan, Diane's SUV, Ben and Carl's pickup, and Mike Kenworth bringing up the rear. The CB connected me to Linda, and Marcus had a walkie-talkie that Linda had given him from the military supplies, set to a shared frequency. Communication was imperfect but functional. For 30 miles, the drive was almost normal. Interstate traffic remained absent, but the road itself was mostly clear. Occasional abandoned vehicles on the shoulders, an overturned RV in the median, but nothing blocking our path. The morning sun climbed, and the landscape shifted from Oklahoma's flat brown to Arkansas's greener hills. Under other circumstances, it would have been a pleasant drive. Then the road began to fill. It started gradually. 1 figure in a field to our right, then 2 more on an overpass. Then a cluster of 6 in the breakdown lane, all moving east. They didn't react to our convoy at first. We were traveling faster than they could process, perhaps, or our vehicles didn't register as prey. But as the density increased, so did their awareness. At mile marker 340, I counted 50 of them in a single field beside the highway. They moved in loose formation, not shoulder to shoulder, but maintaining proximity, a herd with invisible boundaries. Their heads tracked our convoy as we passed, and I saw several change direction, angling toward the highway behind us. "Linda, they're coming onto the road behind me. I see them in my mirrors. Keep speed. They can't match 70. She was right. At highway speed, we left them behind easily. But the frequency of encounters was increasing. Every mile brought more. The fields, the side roads, the overpasses, all of them populated now with that same purposeful eastward drift. We were driving through a migration, a living river of infection flowing toward Little Rock. And we were swimming in the same current. Then Ben's voice came over the walkie-talkie, rough, urgent. "There's something on the road ahead. Big." I couldn't see past the vehicles between my truck and Linda's, but Linda confirmed immediately. "Brecker, we have a mass. 300, maybe 400, on the road surface. Both lanes. They're packed together." A cluster. 400 of them, densely packed. The military journal's 15-meter airborne rule snapped into my mind. A group that size wouldn't just be dangerous to touch. It would be dangerous to breathe near. "Median again?" I asked. "No, look at the median. It's full too. They're spilling off the road in both directions." I craned to see. She was right. The mass ahead wasn't just on the highway. It extended into the median, onto the opposite lanes, into the fields on either side. A river of bodies, hundreds wide, flowing east with the same relentless migration. "We can't drive through them," I said. 15-meter rule. If we slow down in that mass, the airborne vector—" "I know." Linda's voice was tight for the first time. "If we maintain speed and keep windows sealed, air systems on recirculate, we might clear them before exposure matters. And if we can't maintain speed, if they're dense enough to physically block us, then we have a problem." Marcus's voice cut in. "What are we talking about? What's happening?" "Everyone close your windows," Linda commanded. "All air vents closed. Recirculate only. Do not open any doors or windows until I give the all clear. We're going through at speed." I sealed my cab. Windows up, vents closed, air system switched to recirculate. The Kenworth's cab was reasonably airtight. But it wasn't a sealed military vehicle. If the concentration was high enough, if we spent too long in the mass. Linda accelerated. Through the gaps between vehicles ahead, I watched her Peterbilt surge forward toward the wall of bodies. They turned at the sound of engines, hundreds of heads swiveling in unison, dead eyes finding us. And then she hit them. The sound was indescribable. A continuous staccato of impacts as bodies struck her bumper, her fuel tanks, her trailer. She didn't slow. I gripped the wheel and followed. Marcus's sedan plunged into the mass ahead of me, then Diane's SUV, then Ben's pickup. Bodies thudded against their frames. Hands slapped windows. Faces pressed against glass. Mottled, wrong, mouths working open and shut. Eyes that saw us and wanted us. My Kenworth hit the first of them at 65 miles per hour. The truck barely registered the impacts. At this weight and speed, a human body was nothing more than resistance, and the Kenworth's bulldozer-grade bumper pushed through flesh and bone with mechanical indifference. But my windshield was another matter. A body hit it at chest height, cracking the glass in a spiderweb pattern before rolling over the cab roof. Another struck the passenger side mirror, ripping it free. Something wet sprayed across the cracked windshield, fluid, dark and viscous, and my visibility cut by half. I activated the wipers. They smeared the fluid into a translucent film, and I drove half-blind through a sea of bodies that seemed to have no end. The smell penetrated my cab despite the sealed vents. Sweet and putrid, like fruit left to rot in summer heat, with an undertone of something chemical. Ammoniac, sharp. I held my breath instinctively, then realized I'd need to breathe eventually. And that if this was the airborne vector, holding my breath for 30 seconds meant nothing. Ahead, I could see taillights through the smear. Ben's pickup was slowing. Something was wrong. Marcus, report. Ben, report. Linda's voice. We're through, Marcus said, breathing hard. We're clear. The mass thins out ahead. But Ben's voice came back strained. Truck's overheating. Something caught in the grill. Radiators blocked. I'm losing engine temp. Keep moving, Linda shouted. Even at 20 miles an hour, keep moving. I was still in the thick of it. Bodies surrounded my truck now, not just in front, but pressing against the sides, hands reaching for any purchase. They couldn't stop a Kenworth, but they could clog the gaps between my cab and trailer, could pile against my tires if I slowed. I pushed through at speed, the cracked windshield turning the world into an impressionist nightmare of gray shapes and reaching limbs. Then, suddenly, I was through. The mass thinned from solid to sparse to empty in the space of 3 seconds, like emerging from a tunnel. My windshield was opaque with fluid. I hit the washer and wipers simultaneously, and gradually, visibility returned. Ahead, the convoy was regrouping. Linda had stopped half a mile past the mass, and Marcus and Diane were pulled behind her. But Ben's pickup was between me and them, crawling at 15 miles an hour with steam rising from under the hood. Carl was leaning out the passenger window, looking back at me. He waved, "Come around." I passed them on the left, pulled ahead, and parked behind Diane's SUV. In my mirrors, I watched Ben's pickup coast the remaining distance and die with a shuddering cough 20 feet from my trailer. "Engine's gone," Ben said over the walkie. "Radiators destroyed." Linda was already out of her cab, jogging back. I followed. At the pickup, we assessed the damage. The grill was packed solid with material, organic material. The radiator behind it had been pushed backward by repeated impacts, cracking its housing. Coolant pooled beneath the truck, mixing with what dripped from the grill into a pink slurry. "We can't fix this," Linda said flatly. Ben stood beside his truck, rifle in hand, staring at the damage with the rigid posture of a man watching his only escape plan dissolve. Carl stood behind him, silent. "You ride in my truck," I said. "Both of you. There's room behind my cab seats." "Our gear," Ben started. "Bring what you can carry. 60 seconds. We need to move before that herd closes the distance behind us." They moved fast. Duffel bags, the rifle, ammunition, 2 jugs of water. Everything else stayed. Ben's hand lingered on his truck's hood for a moment. Grief for a vehicle, absurd but understandable. Then he climbed into my cab, and Carl followed, and we had 9 people in 4 vehicles instead of 5. The herd behind us was visible in my mirrors, still moving east, still coming. 20 miles from Little Rock, we hit a second military roadblock, but this one was manned. Soldiers behind concrete barriers, weapons raised, floodlights illuminating the highway despite the daylight. A bullhorn voice commanded us to stop, and we did. Every vehicle in our convoy, engines idling, hands visible through windshields, as instructed. A squad of 6 soldiers approached in formation, 4 with rifles trained on our vehicles, 2 with what I recognized from the field journal as thermal scanners. They moved with professional urgency but not hostility. The one who reached Linda's cab first spoke clearly. "Exit your vehicle slowly. All occupants, hands visible. You will be scanned for infection markers." We complied. All 9 of us stood in a line on the highway while soldiers swept thermal devices across our bodies, checking for the elevated temperature that apparently accompanied early infection. One by one, we were cleared. Tyler and Sophie clung to Diane, eyes wide but silent. Marcus stood with his hands raised longer than necessary, as if surrendering to something beyond the soldiers. The squad leader, A sergeant with a name tape reading Okonkwo addressed Linda directly, recognizing some quality of leadership in her stance. "Where are you coming from?" "Fort Smith. It's fallen. Code black, according to your own radio traffic." Okonkwo's jaw tightened. "We know. How recent?" "We were there at dawn, maybe 4 hours ago. The convention center FOB is gone. All personnel either dead or turned. And there's a mass 500 infected, migrating eastbound approximately 30 miles behind us, moving at walking speed." The sergeant processed this without visible emotion, but his hand went to his radio. He stepped away and spoke rapidly to someone on the other end. I caught fragments. "Confirmed mass migration. ETA 6 to 8 hours at foot speed. Recommend forward interdiction." When he returned, his demeanor had shifted, still professional but with a crack of humanity showing through. "Little Rock is still secure. We have a perimeter at 3 points: Interstate 40, Interstate 30, and Highway 10. The convention center downtown is serving as civilian reception. You'll be processed, scanned again, given food and bedding. Follow the marked route. Take the next exit and follow the orange signs. Do not deviate." "Is there communication infrastructure?" Linda asked. "Phone lines, internet?" "Limited. Cell towers are overloaded. We have landlines at the reception center for emergency contacts." I thought of Rachel in Knoxville. A landline. A phone number I'd memorized 23 years ago and never forgotten. We returned to our vehicles. The soldiers waved us through. And as we passed the barriers, I noticed what was behind their position. Not just Humvees and barriers, but a full military installation. Tents, supply dumps, armored vehicles, and soldiers, hundreds of them, in organized formations. Artillery pieces pointed west. This was different from Fort Smith's hastily assembled FOB. This was prepared, entrenched, expecting what was coming and ready for it. For the first time, in 12 hours, I felt something that resembled safety. The orange signs led us through Little Rock's western suburbs, quiet, evacuated, but intact. No fires, no bodies on the streets. The military had cleared this area in advance, creating a buffer zone between their perimeter and the civilian center. Smart, organized. The kind of response that suggested someone with authority was making decisions that worked. The convention center appeared ahead. A familiar structure to anyone who'd driven through Little Rock, now transformed into a refugee processing center with military precision. Buses lined up outside, medical tents in the parking lot, and hundreds of civilians in organized queues waiting for entry. Not chaos, not panic, order. We parked in a designated area for large vehicles, and as I killed the engine, the silence that followed was startling. No road noise, no engine vibration. Just the distant murmur of hundreds of people and the occasional bark of military commands. Ben spoke from behind me. "We made it." "For now," Linda said over the CB. One last transmission before we stepped into whatever came next. I opened my door and stepped down onto solid ground that didn't move beneath me, and my legs nearly buckled. Not from weakness, from the sudden release of tension that had been holding my body rigid for 12 hours straight. Processing took 3 hours. We were separated, scanned again, thermal and blood draw this time, interviewed by military intelligence about our route and observations, then reunited in a waiting area that had once been the convention center's exhibition hall. Now it held cots arranged in grid formation, each one numbered, each one representing someone's temporary existence in this new world. Our group was assigned adjacent cots, a small mercy of bureaucracy. Diane took her grandchildren to the medical tent for evaluation. Marcus disappeared into the line for the phone banks. Ben and Carl found food. MRIs heated on portable stoves, not cuisine but substance, and brought enough for all of us. Linda sat on her cot and cleaned the military pistol with a rag she'd found. Her movements automatic and precise. I sat across from her and opened the field journal I'd taken from Fort Smith, reading it again in better light. "What does it say?" she asked without looking up. Details about the infection, timelines, observations. I summarized the key entries for her. The airborne vector within 15 meters of clusters exceeding 20. The variable conversion rates, 30 seconds to 4 minutes depending on exposure type. The observation that the infected maintained basic locomotion and sensory processing, but showed no signs of higher cognitive function. They couldn't open doors. They couldn't climb obstacles above chest height. They couldn't swim. "Can't swim," Linda repeated. "Interesting." The journal also mentions thermal sensitivity. They avoid fire, not just because it hurts them. They seem to have an aversion to heat sources above a certain threshold. The soldiers used flare perimeters as temporary deterrents. Linda finished with her pistol, slid the magazine back in, and set it on the cot beside her. "That matches what I saw in Tucumcari. They came through town from the west, but they diverted around a house fire. Went around it like water around a stone. I filed this information away. Fire as deterrent, water as barrier." The infected had limitations. They weren't invincible. They were biological organisms following biological imperatives, and those imperatives had exploitable constraints. Marcus returned from the phone banks looking shattered. He sat heavily on his cot and stared at nothing. "No answer?" I asked. "My parents are in Little Rock," he said. "Their number rings and rings. I left 6 messages." He looked at his hands. "They live on the east side, past the military perimeter." I understood what he wasn't saying. The military perimeter protected downtown and the western approaches. Whatever lay east of their line, residential neighborhoods, suburbs, the sprawling edges of the city, was outside the wire, unprotected. "Marcus, I know what you're going to say. Don't." He lay back on his cot and turned away from us. The conversation was over. I found the phone bank an hour later, after waiting in a line that moved with agonizing slowness. 40 landlines in a row, each occupied by someone speaking urgently into a receiver, some crying, some just listening to nothing, to ringing that nobody would answer. When my turn came, I dialed Rachel's number in Knoxville. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times, 4. I prepared myself for voicemail, for silence, for another connection to the void. "Hello?" Her voice, real, present, alive. "Rachel, it's Dad." A pause, then, "Dad, where are you?" "We've been watching the news, Oklahoma, Arkansas, the whole region." "I'm in Little Rock, military safe zone. I'm okay." My voice cracked on the last word, and I gripped the phone like it was the only solid thing in existence. "Are you safe?" "It's Knoxville." "We're okay. They have National Guard on the highways, checkpoints on I-40 and I-75. Nothing's gotten through here yet. But the news, Dad, they're showing satellite images. The whole corridor from New Mexico to Arkansas is..." "I know. Listen to me. Stay where you are. Don't travel. If they tell you to evacuate, go with the military. Go wherever they say. I'm going to get to you. Do you understand? I'm going to get to you. Dad." Her voice was small, younger than her years. "Please be careful." "I will. I love you, Rachel." "I love you too." The phone call changed something in me. Before, I'd been surviving on instinct and proximity, following Linda's lead, reacting to threats, moving because stillness meant death. Now I had a destination beyond the next safe zone. Knoxville, Rachel. 500 miles east through territory that might already be falling. That evening, our group gathered in a corner of the exhibition hall. The convention center was filling rapidly, new arrivals every hour. Each with their own story of escape, each adding data points to the emerging picture of how far the infection had spread. The military briefings, broadcast over loudspeakers every 4 hours, painted it in broad strokes. The infection corridor ran from central New Mexico to western Arkansas, roughly following the I-40 corridor. It was advancing east at approximately 15 miles per hour, the walking speed of the migrating infected, and was expected to reach the Little Rock perimeter within 24 to 36 hours. The military's plan was layered defense: slow the migration with forward interdiction, artillery, airstrikes on large clusters, hold the perimeter for as long as possible, then execute a staged withdrawal eastward to Memphis if the line broke. They were already evacuating civilians east by bus, prioritizing families with children. "We should be on those buses," Diane said, holding Sophie on her lap. Tyler sat beside her, silent and watchful. "You should," Linda agreed. "Take the kids east. Memphis is next in the chain. They'll have another reception center there." Diane looked at her. "What about you?" "I drive my own truck. I'm faster than a bus, and I don't have to stop at every checkpoint." Ben spoke up. "We're staying with the trucks, me and Carl. No offense to the military, but I've seen what happens when their positions get overrun. I'd rather have my own mobility." Marcus was staring at the floor. He hadn't spoken since the phone bank. Now he looked up. "I'm going east side to find my parents." Silence. Linda set down the coffee she'd been drinking. "Marcus, east side is outside the perimeter. That's uncontrolled territory. I know what it is. They're my parents. They're 70 years old. They don't drive anymore. If nobody's gone for them." His voice caught. "I'm going." "You'll die," Linda said. Not cruel, factual. Maybe. Or maybe they're sitting in their house with the doors locked, waiting for someone to come. And if I don't go, no one will. I watched Linda process this. She was calculating, not just survival odds for Marcus, but the implications for our group. A man walking into infected territory was a risk to himself. But he was also intelligence, if he made it back. Knowledge about conditions east of the perimeter that the military might not have. "When?" she asked. "Tonight, before the migration reaches the perimeter. If they're 12 hours out, I have a window." "I'll drive you to the perimeter edge," I heard myself say. Everyone looked at me. "Not outside, but I'll get you as close as the military will let us. It's better than walking from downtown." Marcus stared at me. Why? Because I had a daughter who'd answered the phone. Because I understood what drove him. Because on an overpass in Oklahoma, I'd driven past children waving flashlights. And this was the universe offering me a chance to balance that scale. I didn't say any of this. Because it's the right thing to do. Linda said nothing. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't decode, respect or frustration or something between them. That night, we formulated a plan. Diane and the children would board the next eastbound bus. Marcus and I would drive to the eastern perimeter at first light. Ben and Carl would remain with the trucks, preparing for departure. And Linda would do what Linda did. Gather information, assess options, prepare for every contingency. "Tomorrow morning," Marcus said. "First light." I nodded. In my pocket, the field journal's pages pressed against my chest. Fire as deterrent. Water as barrier. 30 seconds to conversion. These were the rules of the new world, and we'd need every one of them. First light came at 6:42 a.m., November 15th. I'd slept in 30-minute fragments, waking each time to the sounds of the convention center. Crying children, whispered conversations, the constant shuffle of feet on concrete floors. When I rose, Marcus was already dressed, wearing a backpack he'd assembled from military surplus. Water, food, flares, a map of Little Rock's east side with his parents' neighborhood circled in marker. Linda was awake too. She handed me a flare gun, military issue, with 4 rounds. Deterrent, she said. If you encounter a cluster, put a flare into the center. They'll scatter. Thank you. She nodded, then turned to Marcus. You have 4 hours. That's my estimate of your window before the migration reaches the perimeter. And this whole area becomes a combat zone. If you're not back at this convention center by noon, we leave without you. Understood. I mean it, Marcus. Noon, not 12:01. He held her gaze. Noon. Diane had already gone. Processed onto a bus at 4 a.m. with Tyler and Sophie, headed east to Memphis. She'd hugged each of us before departure, and I'd watched her grandchildren's faces through the bus window as it pulled away. Small pale ovals growing smaller until they vanished into the pre-dawn gray. Another separation, another thread cut. I started the Kenworth and Marcus rode shotgun. The military led us through the eastern checkpoint with minimal delay once I explained we were retrieving elderly civilians. The sergeant on duty, not Okonkwo, a different one, looked at Marcus with an expression caught between sympathy and resignation. You've got until the forward units pull back, he said. When you hear sustained artillery to the west, that's our interdiction engaging the migration. You want to be back inside the wire well before that stops. We drove east. The transition from military order to civilian abandonment was immediate. 1 block past the checkpoint, the streets were empty. Not damaged, not burned, just empty. Cars in driveways, porches with forgotten morning papers, a sprinkler running on a lawn, spraying water in a pointless arc across grass that no one would see. Marcus directed me through residential streets, left here, right there, 2 blocks down. His parents lived in a modest neighborhood of 1-story brick houses built in the 1960s, each with a small yard and a single-car garage. As we turned onto their street, Maple Crest Drive, Marcus leaned forward, scanning. That's it. Number 414. Blue door. The house was intact. Blue door closed, curtains drawn, no visible damage or disturbance. But no lights either, despite the early morning dimness that would normally prompt someone to switch on a kitchen lamp. I parked in the driveway. Marcus was out before I'd fully stopped, jogging to the front door, knocking with urgency. Mom? Dad? It's Marcus. Nothing. He knocked again. Tried the handle, locked. Moved to the garage, closed. Went around the side of the house, disappearing from my view. I waited, engine running, eyes sweeping the street. Empty, silent. But not peaceful. The silence here had a quality of held breath, of something paused rather than concluded. 2 houses down, a front door stood open, revealing a dark interior. 3 houses beyond that, a car had rolled partway out of its driveway and stopped with its front wheels in the street, as if the driver had started to leave and then hadn't. Marcus reappeared at the back corner of the house. Back door's unlocked. I'm going in. Marcus. They could be inside, hiding, scared. He was gone before I could object. I sat in the Kenworth's cab with the flare gun in my lap and watched the open houses on the street and listened to the oppressive silence and counted seconds. If I heard screaming, I'd fire a flare through the window. If I saw infected, I'd lay on the horn to draw them away from the house. These were the contingencies my mind assembled, while the man I barely knew searched for parents I'd never met. 3 minutes passed, then 5. At 7 minutes, Marcus emerged from the front door. He was alone. His face told me everything before his words did. He walked to the truck with a measured stride that was clearly costing him everything. Climbed into the passenger seat, closed the door with careful precision, stared straight ahead. "They're not there," he said. Not there, not turned, not dead, gone. Their coats are gone from the hooks. Their shoes are gone from the mat. The car is in the garage, but their emergency bag, my dad's old army duffel, it's gone from the closet. He swallowed. They left, under their own power. Recently, there's fresh coffee in the pot, still slightly warm. Relief and uncertainty in equal measure. His parents had evacuated, perhaps to the military center, perhaps to a neighbor's car, perhaps to some other destination. They were mobile, alive, but unreachable. "They might be at the convention center," I said. "Processed after you. Different bus, different queue." "Maybe." He wiped his eyes with his sleeve. A single motion, practical, not lingering. "Let's go back." I reversed out of the driveway and turned west toward the checkpoint. We'd been outside the perimeter for 22 minutes. The window was still open. But as I drove back through the empty streets, I noticed something had changed. The quality of the air, perhaps, or a sound beneath the silence. A vibration. Then I heard it. Low, rhythmic, growing. The distant thud of artillery. To the west, beyond the city, the military was engaging the migration. The sound rolled through the streets like approaching thunder. And with it came the understanding that our window was narrowing faster than estimated. "They're early," Marcus said. "The migration reached them ahead of schedule." I pressed the accelerator. The Kenworth surged through residential streets, not designed for tractor-trailers, my mirrors clipping mailboxes and tree branches, my trailer sweeping wide on every turn. Behind us, and I checked the mirrors compulsively, the streets remained empty. But the artillery was intensifying, and between its booms, I could hear something else. A helicopter, low and fast, heading west. Then another. The checkpoint appeared ahead. Soldiers were in motion, organized but urgent, moving barriers, loading vehicles. They were preparing to pull back. "Coming through!" I shouted out my window. A soldier waved frantically. "Come on, move now." I rolled through the checkpoint at speed, and behind me, soldiers were already collapsing the barriers. The convention center was controlled chaos. Buses loading. Military vehicles forming columns. Loudspeakers announcing evacuation procedures in a calm voice that contrasted absurdly with the artillery percussion from the west. Linda met us at the truck. "You're back." "Good. We're leaving in 10 minutes. "What happened?" "They said 24 to 36 hours. They were wrong. The migration split during the night. Secondary column came down E30 from the south, caught the perimeter at an angle. The western line is holding for now, but command has ordered preemptive civilian evacuation east to Memphis. Every vehicle is leaving." Ben and Carl were already in my cab. Linda's Peterbilt was idling, ready to move. "Marcus, your parents. They might have been evacuated ahead of us." "I know. I'll check Memphis." He was steady now. Grief transmuted into purpose. His parents were alive somewhere in the system. Finding them was a problem with a solution, even if the solution required distance and time. We mounted up. Linda took point again, and I fell in behind a military convoy heading east on IE-40. A column of trucks, Humvees, and buses stretching ahead for miles. The evacuation of Little Rock was underway, and we were part of it now, carried east by the same current that had driven us since Oklahoma. In my mirrors, the skyline of Little Rock grew smaller. Artillery flashes lit the western horizon like heat lightning. The military was buying time with ordnance, and every mile of distance purchased was a mile of survival for the people in those buses. Marcus sat in the passenger seat beside me, silent, his backpack still on as if he might need to jump out at any moment. Behind us, Ben and Carl sat in the sleeper compartment, the hunting rifle across Ben's knees. 500 miles to Knoxville. Rachel was waiting. The military convoy maintained 60 miles per hour eastbound, and we rode in its wake like pilot fish following a shark. The discipline of it was reassuring, each vehicle maintaining spacing, communications crackling with updates, helicopter escorts overhead scanning the road ahead. For the first time since that empty rest stop outside Oklahoma, I felt part of something organized, something with resources and plans and authority. But the organization had limits. At the Arkansas-Tennessee border, the convoy split. Military vehicles veered south toward a staging area near West Memphis, while civilian traffic was directed to continue east on I-40 toward the Memphis Metropolitan Reception Center. We followed the civilian route, our 2 trucks conspicuous among the smaller vehicles but unremarked upon. Everyone was too focused on moving to notice what anyone else was driving. Memphis appeared at dusk, its skyline intact, its bridges lit, its infrastructure functioning. The reception center was the FedEx Forum, a massive arena converted to the same purpose as Little Rock's convention center, but larger, better supplied, more established. This wasn't a hastily assembled response. Memphis had been preparing for weeks, perhaps since the first reports from the Southwest. We were processed efficiently. Thermal scans, blood draws, registration. Marcus immediately went to the family reunion database, a system the military had established for matching separated families. He found it within 15 minutes. His parents' names, processed in Little Rock 6 hours before us, evacuated on an earlier bus, currently assigned to the Memphis Convention Hall overflow facility across town. He broke. Standing at the computer terminal, he put his head in his hands and shook. And for a full minute, none of us touched him or spoke. Some moments belong only to the person experiencing them. When he straightened, his eyes were red, but his jaw was set. "I'm going to them," he said. "Go," Linda told him. "Take one of the military shuttle buses. They run every 20 minutes. He shook our hands, Ben's, Carl's, mine. When he reached Linda, he hesitated, then hugged her. She allowed it for exactly 3 seconds before stepping back. "Stay alive, Marcus. You too, all of you." He jogged toward the shuttle bus area and was gone. Our group of 9 was now 5. Diane and the children somewhere in this same system. Marcus reuniting with his parents. The world still subtracting people from my immediate reality, but now, through reunion rather than loss. I found the phone bank, called Rachel. She answered on the second ring. "Dad, where are you now?" "Memphis. I'm coming, baby. I'll be there tomorrow." The news is saying Memphis is the last major holding point before the eastern seaboard. Her voice was controlled but brittle. "They're saying if Memphis falls, Memphis isn't going to fall tomorrow. And I'll be gone from it by morning. I just need to drive. It's what I do, Rachel. I drive. Be careful, please. Always. I'll call you from Nashville if the lines are still up. After the call, I found Linda at her truck, doing a walk-around inspection, checking tires, checking fluid levels, running her hands along the trailer brackets with the attentiveness of someone who understood that mechanical failure in the current world was indistinguishable from death. I'm leaving tonight, I told her. I can't wait until morning. Every hour is distance, and the migration is behind us. She straightened and looked at me. The sodium lights of the arena parking lot cast her face in amber. And I noticed for the first time how exhausted she looked. Dark circles beneath her eyes, a tightness in her jaw that spoke of sustained tension. I'm going south, she said. My sister's in Baton Rouge. Different vector. The migration is east-northeast, not south. Baton Rouge should be clear. The divergence was inevitable. We'd been a convoy of convenience, two strangers whose survival needs aligned on the same road. Now the road branched, and with it, our partnership. Linda Vasquez, I said. Thank you. Dale Brecker. She extended her hand. Don't die on I-40. I'll try. Her handshake was firm, brief, and final. She climbed into her Peterbilt, and 10 minutes later, I watched her taillights disappear south on Highway 61. I left Memphis at 2200 hours with Ben and Carl still in my sleeper compartment. They'd decided to ride with me to Nashville. Their family was north of there, in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Another divergence coming, but not yet. For now, we were 3 men in a truck driving east through the Tennessee night, and the road ahead was clear. The military presence thinned as we moved east from Memphis, but never disappeared entirely. National Guard checkpoints at major exits, patrol vehicles on the highway, helicopter lights sweeping the tree lines. Tennessee was not yet touched by the infection, but it was braced for impact. Every overpass had spotters. Every bridge had guards. I drove through the night. Ben and Carl slept behind me. True sleep, the deep, unconscious rest of men who'd finally stopped running long enough for their bodies to demand tribute. I envied them. My own fatigue was a physical force pressing against my eyelids. But every time I considered pulling over, I thought of Rachel and pressed on. At Nashville, the dawn came again, my second sunrise since this began. The city was operating under emergency protocols, but still functional. Traffic existed here, actual civilian traffic, people commuting under military escort, going about modified lives in the shadow of a crisis that hadn't reached them yet. The normalcy was disorienting. I stopped at a checkpoint, was cleared, and pulled into a rest area where I let Ben and Carl out. Bowling Green's an hour north on I-65, I said. Military shuttle runs from here. Ben shook my hand with a grip that communicated everything words couldn't. You saved us back there, Brecker. At the herd. My truck. Anyone would have done the same. No, Carl said quietly. Not anyone. They took their bags, their rifle, their remaining supplies, and walked toward the shuttle station. I watched them go. 2 brothers, shoulders touching, alive. Then I pulled back onto I-40 East and drove the final 200 miles to Knoxville. The drive was surreal in its normalcy. Tennessee farmland rolled by. Other trucks passed me going west, empty, heading toward Memphis to assist with evacuations. Radio stations broadcast a mix of emergency information and regular programming, as if the world couldn't decide whether it was ending or continuing. I listened to a DJ transition from a report about the Little Rock perimeter, still holding as of 0600, to a song by someone I didn't recognize. And the juxtaposition nearly made me laugh. I reached Knoxville at 1:47 p.m., November 15th. 36 hours since that empty rest stop in Oklahoma, 1,500 miles, 3 military perimeters, one herd of 400 infected driven through at speed, countless dead left behind. Rachel's apartment was in a complex near the university. I parked my Kenworth in the lot, absurdly oversized for the space, trailer hanging into the access road, and walked to her door on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. She opened before I knocked. She'd been watching from the window. And then she was against my chest, and I was holding my daughter for the first time in 14 months. And neither of us spoke, because there was nothing language could add to the fact of being alive and together in the same square feet of earth. "You're here," she said finally. "I'm here." We stood in her doorway while the autumn sun slanted through Tennessee trees, and somewhere far to the west, artillery still fired, and the migration still moved, and the world still burned. But in this moment, on this porch, there was nothing but a father and his daughter, and the fundamental truth that I'd driven through the end of everything to reach this exact place. I didn't know what came next. None of us did. The infection was still moving, still evolving, still consuming. Memphis would hold, or it wouldn't. Nashville would prepare, or it wouldn't. The military would win, or it wouldn't. But I was here. Rachel was alive. And for one moment, standing in an open doorway in Knoxville with my boots still carrying dust from Oklahoma, that was enough. It's been 3 weeks since that drive. I'm writing this from Rachel's apartment, where the windows stay closed and the emergency radio stays on, and every distant siren makes us look at each other across the room. Memphis held. Nashville fortified. The migration stalled at the Mississippi River. They can't swim, just like the journal said. And the bridges were destroyed by the Army Corps of Engineers in a decision that will be debated for generations. The infection is still out there, still evolving, still pressing against the barriers humanity has erected. But it stopped moving east, at least for now. The river holds. Linda called once. Baton Rouge was safe. Mark has sent a message through the reunion system. His parents are healthy, living in a FEMA camp in Jackson, Mississippi. I never learned what happened to Diane's grandchildren, or to the people on that overpass in Oklahoma with their bedsheet sign. I still drive. Supply runs now, between checkpoints, carrying essentials to communities cut off by the quarantine lines. The road is different. Checkpoints, armed escorts, thermal scans at every stop. But the road is still mine. And every time I pass an empty rest stop, I don't slow down.